Husband, 45 male, and nanny, 22 female, conundrum. Honestly, I am such an emotional mess right now and keep asking myself over and over. What could a grown man possibly have in common with the nanny who is young enough to be his daughter, and has never uttered a word to his wife about this after-hours arrangement, that has been going on for a long time according to our oldest child, when indirectly asked about it? My husband, 45 male, and I, 38 female, have 3 children. 2 girls and a boy, ranging between the ages of 4 to 9. And our current nanny has been with us for 19 months thus far. She is 22 years old and currently taking a gap year before commencing grad school in the fall. She had previously babysat for one of my close friends who also knows her family and came with many good recommendations in tow. Our previous nanny was in her 30s and had been with us since my oldest child was a few months old, but was moving away from Oakland in June 2017, and could no longer make the commute to us, which necessitated the need for someone else. When I eventually conducted the interview with this new girl a few days later, she made quite an impression with my kids and they had taken a liking to her almost immediately, so it was a no-brainer. Since hiring her, this girl has practically become a part of our family as she babysits almost every weekend, spending Saturdays out with my kids and on some weekdays depending on my schedule. She has also come along with us on trips to Hawaii, Florida, and Mexico. I have no complaints about the way she handles my children. They practically love her to bits and she does a really good job on that front. As the title suggests, however, I have been seriously contemplating nanny cameras during these past 4 days. Initially sparked by a situation that transpired with my husband last weekend, whereby the nanny was supposed to leave as soon as the kids were put to bed by 10:30 and go home. This is how it has always been, or at the very least, how I've wanted it to be, and expect her to follow through with it. I plan corporate events for a leaving, and Saturdays are some of my busiest days, so I'm usually not home until midnight or even later on some occasions. On this particular Saturday, I got home at 1 in the morning and found this girl still in my house, putting on her coat as I opened the door to step into my foyer, and my husband had walked directly behind her leading from our den. It appears that she had already been paid and looked flustered for a minute. When I asked what she was still doing here, she responded, "We were watching a movie." We, referring to my husband and her, of course. It was already so late and there was no way I was going to probe further, so I put on a fake smile, told her bye, and out she went. I immediately rolled my eyes at my husband and began to walk up the stairs to our bedroom, not saying a word. He knew I was angry. Ran up behind me to tell me that he couldn't just tell her to leave, and it's not like she's a stranger in this house. My intuition told me that something isn't quite right here and haven't been able to shake those feelings off since. The next day, I had asked one of my daughters about what time they had went to bed, and she said her younger siblings were already in bed, but she slept later since the nanny and her father were talking a lot and laughing that she could hear them all the way upstairs until she fell asleep. She told me that they do this on most Saturday evenings, so obviously someone must have lost track of time. No? I haven't asked my husband about this as yet. This is where it begins to get muddied for me, however, and in part, probably is due to my own naivety. This young lady, who is quite attractive and full of promise, has had a crush on my husband from the moment she began working for us, and I overheard her speaking to her friend on loudspeaker from the landing above and out of sight, while she was tying my son's shoelaces at the bottom of the main stairwell. She told her friend that she was working, and the friend immediately responded with, "The one with the hot dad?" She said yes, and turned off the loudspeaker as soon as one of my daughters slid down the banister. To be honest, it didn't bother me then, and I wasn't going to blame a young girl for having a harmless crush on an older man that will go nowhere. I did tell my husband about it soon afterwards, and the both of us laughed it off. However, that was a different place and time in my life, because I have to admit that the aforementioned incident has now turned me into a paranoid mess within a few short days, and led me to go back and revisit all of the photographs we had taken on our trips with this girl. In so many of them, my husband holds her closely around the waist and they are both sporting mile-wide smiles. On some Saturdays, she has also joined my kids and husband on day trips while I am busy with work. I do find it amazing that my husband doesn't talk much to her beyond small talk and the kids when I am around, but suddenly has a lot to say when I'm not. He also has a habit of tipping her graciously, whereas I stick to the predefined amount according to the number of hours spent. In retrospect, there are situations that now make me question them and if these two are going behind my back, or if it's just my overactive imagination assuming the worst. Firing her is out of the question for now, but I think installing nanny cameras would help restore my sanity and hopefully put this paranoia to rest. Edit to add. I was told back in 2017 to be aware of my husband and nanny by one of his friend's wives turned ex, who was going through a rough patch in her own marriage that they never came back from. Her husband was cheating on her with a mutual friend, and as a result, she had a nervous breakdown that eventually required hospitalization. I didn't bother much since it was a comment that was made out of the blue, and believed that she was being neurotic, attributing it to her own troubles instead. Their divorce is ongoing and has become quite bitter. Based on recent developments, I was insanely curious and had to speak to her on the phone this week, and finally ask her why she felt inclined to tell me that about my husband. So I brought it up with her in a jokey sort of by the way yesterday. She told me that she can't believe this girl is still working for me and hasn't been let go. Unless it was one isolated incident and the only one she's seen with her own eyes, whereby my husband and nanny heavily flirted with each other at our house when I was away and her kids were hanging out with ours in the fall of 2017. She was there to pick up her kids and apparently, it caught my husband off guard, because his and the nanny's backs were facing this woman as she walked into the living room from the foyer, and these two were in the adjoining kitchen. The kids were playing in the pool on that particular day, but what she said next has floored me ever since. My nanny was in her bathing suit and my husband was shirtless, and they were basically petting and whispering to each other until they realized that someone else was in the next room looking directly at them. She said that she immediately gave my husband a disapproving glance and it set him off, so he told her something along the lines of, "Stop projecting your insecurities onto my marriage. And please tend to your own garden." While the nanny put her head down and paced away. Because of this, she soon demanded that her kids get ready to leave and stormed out of there. She hasn't been back to our home since. Finally, I received an answer as to why she stopped talking to him well over a year ago. As the running narrative was that she was a psycho, and that I should keep my distance since some of the other wives had decided to pull away. I should also note that he has defended this woman's husband, his friend, and stood by him all along no matter how repugnant his behavior became, and so does the rest of their clique. She also told me that she didn't want to cause problems in our marriage since hers was already on the rocks, but given that my husband practically gaslighted her, she telling me to be aware, was her way of advising me to be cautious. Still, I am not ready to explicitly reveal to her that my husband is now exhibiting signs of being a cheater just yet, because news spreads like wildfire and I'm not willing to risk an inadvertent slip-up. If the duck test is anything to go by, my husband appears to be ticking off all the boxes with each passing day, and my inner self is slowly being shattered into a million pieces. Prior to asking this woman to clarify what she meant about something that has intensely bugged me over the last week, because I've been mentally combing through past events, I was equal parts curious and extremely anxious, but I can't quite describe the dreadfulness of knowing that my suspicions are heading towards the inevitable. Opinions and advice would be appreciated. Always trust your gut. Your brain and heart will find loopholes and excuses. But your gut? Your gut can't be swayed from what it knows. Get some nanny cams and tell no one, and I mean no one, that you have them. Be prepared for what you find, and start thinking now what you will do if it is cheating. Divorce? Attempt reconciliation? No matter what, I would fire the nanny. She is actively going behind your back and lying to you about how long she stays if nothing else. Your husband is also guilty of lies by omission at best. At the very least we are talking about an emotional affair/flirtation. And that isn't good. As to what he could possibly see in a hot 22-year-old girl who laughs at all his jokes, the ones you have heard a million times. Who is impressed by his status and career, even though you know how he got there and all the missteps along the way, and thinks he is so hot. And young. My ex turned 50 and found a 36-year-old. Believe me, had he the option of a 22-year-old he would have taken it in a heartbeat. A lot of men, sorry guys, but the truth is the truth, when they hit their late 40s and beyond, think that somehow the youth/old age of the woman they are with is reflected back onto themselves. An old guy with a hot young girl suddenly become a hot young stud. Same old guy with his similarly aged wife? Well, now he is old. I base this on the dating scene. So many guys my age want women young enough to be their daughters. It's sad, pathetic, but real. Trust your gut. Get your nanny cams. I can't even begin to describe just how flabbergasted to know that my husband has been having this late night rendezvous for an entire year or longer, and I am just only finding out about it. This is someone I fell madly in love with nearly 11 years ago to this day, and we married a year later. When I finally introduced him to my extended family and friends back home, following our engagement a few months later, some remarked that I scored the trifecta because he fit their definition of what success looks like. Good looks, high-flying career, and comes from an upper-crust family. In reality, however, I could hold my own and did not need a man to save me. But here was this amazing guy whom I literally met a month after relocating to the Bay Area by chance, and found myself attracted to on a much deeper level that went beyond what most people saw on the surface, and we were definitely on cloud nine. An aunt jokingly told me at my wedding that I might need to put him on a leash, and rein him in whenever another woman appears, and we both shared a laugh. Years later, it stops being funny and makes me feel sick when you realize that I love and trusted this man with every fiber of my being. I had sacrificed so much as his career kept soaring to new heights and spent the first 7 years at home being a good wife. Having his babies and raising them while putting my own dreams on hold so he could leave his. It was a compromise I made and was willing to accept, but now. I can't even begin to describe the anger I feel when I look back on that part of our lives, because the moment I decide to pursue my own ambitions, he could very well be using it as an opportunity to screw the person whom I entrusted our children with. Who knows if there have been others before this or how many? No one feels this emboldened unless they have played with fire before, and believes they could pull it off under the same roof they share with their wife and children. No older man gets comfortable with a 22-year-old young woman after hours, for well over a year, while his children are sound asleep upstairs and his wife is out, unless sex is somewhere on the cards either. How could I ever compete with someone who is much younger than me? Never in my worst nightmares would I have ever thought my husband would turn out to be just another rich philanderer who can't keep it in his pants. But here we are facing the very real possibility that he is exactly that, and I am unable to shake it off because my gut tells me that it is true. I wouldn't do the nanny cam thing. I'd recommend voice-activated recorders instead. They are cheaper and easier to hide. If he sees a new clock, radio, or outlet, or whatever you're hiding the nanny cam in, he'll become suspicious and investigate. At this point, you want him to believe that you suspect nothing. You should be your usually cheery self with both him and the nanny. Let them get comfortable and make a mistake. As far as I know, California doesn't permit the use of voice recorders, or is there something you know that I don't? I looked over the nanny's contract again and we don't have any stipulations about audiovisual recordings, etc., which may or may not be a good thing. I did let them get comfortable because my husband returned from his business trip yesterday evening, and the nanny was at home to welcome him until I got home at midnight, and he was already asleep and she was nowhere to be seen. When the nanny arrived earlier in the day, my feelings were a mixture of hate and resentment, and I honestly couldn't wait to leave than be around her a second longer. While my husband may have learned his lesson about having her hang around till I get home, I highly doubt that she left as soon as the kids were put to bed, as this arrangement has already been going on for a long time. I've been playing my gregarious self, and he is his usual upbeat self and hasn't mentioned the nanny besides recounting his trip to me. So I doubt he suspects that his wife is now onto him. His iPhone and iPad have touchscreen ID, so I can't actually access them without his active participation. But I'm waiting to get my hands on his MacBook because I think he may have saved his password for his Verizon account on there, and I want to access his phone bills. I am angry for you. Who does this girl think she is? She has a lot of nerve to integrate herself into your family so intimately without respecting you and your husband's relationship. It's completely inappropriate for her to be staying late. Her duties are finished once the children are asleep. If your husband is home to watch, then why is she hanging around? It sounds like she does not have any boundaries at all and lacks respect for you. I was actually a nanny in college. I too went on trips with families. I respected my employer's relationship and I wouldn't dream of doing anything to tear their family apart. Definitely trust your gut. Even if you don't have solid evidence, the fact that she's staying late is beyond inappropriate. Kick her out ASAP. Frankly, you don't owe her anything after these little stunts she's pulled. How dare she? And how dare he? I'm mad at both of them for you. There is a line that people shouldn't cross. Especially in these sorts of jobs where you become like family to each other. Regardless of context, this kind of behavior would be inappropriate in any other job. If you worked an office job, would you stay late with your boss watching movies on the couch? Would you talk about how you're attracted to your boss in front of your manager? Would you accept larger than appropriate cash tips? He's her boss. She's doing all of these things that would get most people at a regular job fired. Keep that in mind. No matter how many people try to justify her behavior, it's not normal. You sound like an intelligent, lovely and patient person. I'm so sorry that you're going through this. Talk to your husband. Perhaps he has only enjoyed the warmth of her attention. He needs to come clean and realize that for the sake of everyone involved, he needs to be the one to back off/out. Meaning he needs to start giving the nanny the old cold shoulder. If he can't do that, you got bigger problems than where to buy cameras.